What if instead of moving through life as a mindless consumer, you could become a co-creator of the better post-capitalist solarpunk economy you know is possible? What if instead of passively participating in an economy built on the destruction of people and planet, you could actively build your own personal economy that restores, rejuvenates, and regenerates both of them? Even though capitalism is a harmful, soul-crushing economic model that's been imposed on society, that doesn't mean you can't find ways to design your own more holistic, sustainable, and satisfying version that benefits you, your community, and the planet more than those greedy billionaires, corporations, and politicians. Most conversations about the economy or new economic models tend to focus on the macro or systems-wide level. That can make it feel overwhelming, like there's little you can do as an individual to help push for that change. So you just have to hope and wait for the system to change. That's certainly how I felt when I started on this journey to align my money and my life with my more environmentally and socially conscious values and vision for the future. Eventually, though, as I kept learning and connecting with others on a similar journey, I realized there was a good bit that I and others could be doing at the micro or personal level to participate less in consumerism and build our own regenerative personal economies. That's what I'll be covering in this video. And for anyone who wants to take a deeper dive into this topic, you can check out my Personal Economy Makeover course, which I've linked to in the description below. Before I continue though, I want to mention a concept that I've heard of referenced in the permaculture world as the ethic of transition, which acknowledges that while we're striving towards more sustainable and regenerative systems, we currently exist and have to navigate within an imperfect system. I think this especially applies to the realm of money and the economy. So keep that in mind as you listen to this and grapple with designing your own more regenerative personal economy. And for anyone not familiar with Solarpunk, which is a term I used earlier, it's a movement centered on an optimistic vision of a sustainable future, and very much in line with the type of personal economy I hope to inspire you to create for yourself. Now, when I say personal economy, what I'm referring to is how you earn, spend, invest, and manage your money and your life. This is something I've been working to cultivate in my life for the past 15 years. The goal being to create a more financially resilient life in the face of capitalism, a more climate resilient life in the face of rapid climate change, and a more resilient life in general, given the growing ineptness of our governments, and the continued upward transference of wealth that puts large numbers of us at risk for all kinds of harm. So let's dive in. If you look at this diagram of a conventional personal economy, what you see is a sketch of the basic trap we all find ourselves in, dependent on money from the system to meet our needs from the system, tied to lives we don't like, and kept from the things that really matter to us. You can also see that this conventional personal economy, which most of us have, relies solely on financial capital and supports the problems, like those greedy billionaires and corporations, instead of the solutions. In this personal economy, the inputs are pretty much only money and financial capital, and they come from things like a soul-crushing job, loans, credit cards, and maybe some investments in Wall Street. So even the money in this personal economy comes from things that are exacerbating our social and environmental problems. On top of that, many of us are struggling to even hold on to any of that financial capital that comes into our personal economy. Often, money from our job just comes in and then goes straight back out. And when we are able to hold it in our personal economy, we're doing it by putting it into banks that fund the fossil fuels industry, or put it into Wall Street stocks that are propping up the companies that are advocating for things that are against the good of the people. Then, when people spend their money sending it out of their personal economy, they're doing that at places like Walmart or Amazon, or other businesses that are outside of their community. So they're sending their money out of their communities, and their communities are becoming poorer and less vibrant. And then they themselves are suffering because they live in less financially sound and vibrant communities. Not only that, much of the stuff that people are buying, especially that stuff from Amazon and Walmart, doesn't hold its value. So they're just leaking money and wealth out of their own personal economy and not really gaining anything for it. They're not spending or directing it in ways that capture and store the energy of that value in their own personal economy. Some people are even accumulating credit card debt to purchase these items that are going to lose their value quickly. It's also worth noting that because this personal economy relies solely on financial capital, it's extremely fragile, which makes you extremely fragile, especially since these days money is just digits in some digital ether that relies on electricity to be available to us, and that hackers don't steal it from you. If you've made it this far in the video, I suspect you're not all that satisfied with your own conventional personal economy. So how do you get to that more regenerative personal economy? Well, while our current capitalist economy careens full speed ahead with destroying nature, you'd actually be wise to take a much closer look at natural systems to find the path to prosperity and a good life. Nature actually has a lot to teach you about building your own personal economy. As this image demonstrates, wild ecosystems naturally grow wealthier, more diverse, more fertile, and more resilient over time. They prosper, but produce no waste. In fact, waste products become resources that further enrich the ecosystem. Instead of hoarding like sociopathic billionaires, the organisms in these ecosystems leak value and store energy in the beings around them. So let's look more closely at a regenerative personal economy that grows your wealth through synergistic relationships and interactions could look like. Before we do that though, I'd like to remind you of that ethic of transition in which we're straddling both the old and new economies at the same time. I also want to highlight that I am not an economist. This is simply a framework my Growing Free co-authors and I created to help people improve their lives and communities while working toward the change they want to see in the world. Money and financial capital still play a role. It's probably best to view this version of a regenerative economy as a bridge towards that better post-capitalist economy we hope to help evolve. I'm not proposing it as a final destination. So remember that fragile conventional personal economy that relies solely on financial capital, in which it's hard to hold on to pretty much any of the money you earn, and most of it goes right back out into that horrible system? Well, this regenerative personal economy does the opposite. It prioritizes catching and storing the energy of financial capital and other non-monetary forms of capital, keeping that money in value in your personal economy or that of your community or other communities that align with your values, instead of transferring and leaking so much of it out to Wall Street. So since for now, money and financial capital still play a role in a regenerative personal economy, let's consider more regenerative ways that we could earn it. When it comes to our labor or work, I think about this in terms of regenerative right livelihood. Right livelihood is the Buddhist concept of doing honest work that doesn't harm others. We can add to that and make it regenerative by doing work that restores, repairs, and regenerates people and planet. So where a conventional personal economy is often funded by a soul-crushing corporate job that benefits billionaires and shareholders while simultaneously harming people and planet, you're going to strive to transition to earning your income doing work that heals people and planet, or at least causes less harm. You can look to winners of the Right Livelihood Award like Vandana Shiva for inspiration and ideas. Even being a lawyer, a doctor, or an accountant can be a regenerative profession. Just look at the amazing work the team at the Sustainable Economies Law Center is doing. And if you're not able to do this right away or ever, that doesn't mean you can't pursue other parts of a regenerative personal economy. Similarly, as you start transitioning your money out of those Wall Street investments, you can start putting it in some of the far less harmful and extractive options. A great first step is to break up with your mega bank, which is funding the fossil fuels industry and relies on predatory lending practices. Instead, you can move your accounts into your local credit union or to CDFIs supporting marginal communities like the Native American Bank. Instead of investing in the stock market, you can make a loan to a regenerative farmer through the Steward platform, invest in cooperatively owned businesses through the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast, Or get involved with or start a local lending club to support businesses in your community. If you'd like some guidance in this realm, I've linked in the description below to a list of self-identified radical financial advisors who help their clients move their money off Wall Street into these more socially conscious investments. As I mentioned, a key feature of a regenerative personal economy is that it relies heavily on multiple forms of capital, not just financial capital. A few of those other forms of capital include social capital, which is your connections to others, experiential capital, which are skills like gardening, plumbing, or singing, along with good physical and mental health. I covered the multiple forms of capital in a separate video, which you can watch if you want to expand your understanding of this paradigm-shifting concept. You want your regenerative personal economy to support you, while simultaneously leaking value out into your community and the ecosystem you live in. Participating in local buy-nothing groups, time banks, offers an exchange market, swap meets, free stores, as well as other moneyless community exchanges and mutual aid efforts are great examples of this. They help people procure things for free, keep still useful items out of the waste stream, and foster connections. Dumpster diving and my other waste stream diversion activities like foraging fallen fruit have played a similar role in my own personal economy. They have saved and earned me thousands of dollars as I redirect waste in my community, while getting to spend more time outside having fun and being physically active. In order to truly catch and store energy in your own personal economy, it's imperative that you give a conventional wealth-building concept a regenerative twist. You still want to think in terms of assets and investments, but not the Wall Street way. Instead, you want to recognize the value of your precious time, energy, and money. So when you spend them, as much as possible, you're spending them on goods and services that hold their value, could potentially increase in value, can help you earn more money, improve the quality of your life, and benefit your community and the planet. So instead of being a typical consumer and putting your money into degenerative assets that will quickly lose their value and become yet another item in our waste stream like this Stanley Cup, you could direct that money instead into a generative or regenerative asset or investment. For example, you could use that $25 that you would have spent on a Stanley Cup to go to the farmer's market instead and buy some healthy, locally grown food that supports your health and your local economy. Or use it to pay for a class to learn a new skill that could earn or save you money or just make your heart sing. Edible gardens and food forests are other great examples of regenerative investments. One asset I'm focusing on in my regenerative retirement account is native soap nut trees. Just like it sounds, soap nuts can be used to create cleaning products, detergent, shampoo, and more. I've planted 3 of these trees in my yard and no one else in the area is growing them. Once I'm able to start harvesting them, they'll save me money, potentially earn me money if I ever want to sell them, and provide me with a unique item to gift or barter with. And they'll also make me more resilient in the face of future supply chain disruptions. I believe that there are a plethora of overlooked regenerative assets around us, and the world would be in such a better place if more of us were recognizing them and responsibly cultivating and harvesting them to share them with the world. One example that comes to mind are the jamun plums that litter the streets in my area once a year. No one does anything with them, and they're just considered a nuisance. Most people don't even know what this tree is, yet every part of it, the fruit, the seeds, the bark, the leaves, is medicinal, helping people to manage high blood pressure and high blood sugar levels, 2 major health problems in affluent countries like where I live. It's a great example of how a problem could be turned into a solution. So do you see how much more dynamic and joyful and less fragile this regenerative personal economy is than that conventional version? To be clear, it's not about amassing and hoarding lots of wealth or turning every resource around you into an asset, but figuring out what the enough point is for you to live in balance and harmony with yourself, your community, and the planet, all while participating in our collective effort to evolve a truly more solarpunk, post-capitalist personal economy for everyone. Lastly, I found other people's stories extremely helpful in my own efforts to escape the rat race and create a regenerative personal economy. So watch this video next if you want to learn from my own story and how I got to where I am today.